Welcome to the Grow Like a Mother podcast. On this episode, I'm joined by Heidi Carlson, who is a mother wound coach. And Heidi helps women heal that deep-rooted wound that can come from their upbringing, and it can kind of impact their relationships, parenting, careers, all sorts of stuff. Heidi's personal journey from navigating the complexities of her childhood to transforming her own relationships, it inspired her. It inspired her to guide women towards reclaiming their power, achieving inner peace, and building meaningful connections. So today, she's here to share her expertise and insights on how healing the mother wound can empower us to thrive and create the lives we deserve. Before we head into this episode, though, I want to make sure that you've heard about my guest, Angela Lay. Angela is another podcast guest. I interviewed her last season, and we also had a conversation about parenting and mothers and trauma and lies. And so, if you're interested in diving a little bit deeper into some of the emotional lies that we might have been told and different ways that we can heal past traumas as well, kind of on the same line as what we're talking about with Heidi today, I recommend that you head on over and check out that episode. I'll make sure it's linked in the show notes for you. But let's go ahead and welcome Heidi to the Grow Like a Mother podcast. Heidi, thank you so much for being here on the show. I'm really excited to talk to you today.
You are so welcome. I'm excited to be here as well. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's a topic I haven't touched on the podcast yet, and it feels so relevant to all of the listeners who are, all moms who have all had moms who are all parenting, and this idea of the mother wound feels really poignant and applicable to all. So I want to start the conversation by asking you, what the heck is a mother wound?
Good.
And how does, well, let's start there, and then I have many more questions for you. But what is a mother wound?
Yeah, so a mother wound is psychological, emotional, or physical pain or trauma that results from unmet needs or neglect by your mother.
Hmm.
So growing up, you were neglected in some way. Your critical needs were unmet and you were neglected in some way. And as a result of that, it forms mother wounds. So to give you an example, one wound that's actually quite common is being emotionally neglected. So growing up, your mother was not present for you when you needed her emotionally. You were struggling, you were angry, you were crying, you were sad, you were hurt, and she didn't know how to comfort you. And so she either didn't or did it the wrong way or shut you down because she didn't know what to do. So all she could do was shut you down. Um, and so what happened there is you're emotionally suppressed during your upbringing, and that's an unmet need, and that's emotional neglect. And so that turns into a wound that you have, within you that lives within you throughout your life.
Is it possible for the wound to live on some sort of spectrum where there could be like the big T trauma, the little T trauma, or is it like all or nothing? Can we experience it on a scale?
Absolutely. There's definitely a scale. There's little t we say little t's, big t's, there's little traumas, big traumas. So absolutely it lives on a scale. It's dependent on so many factors, and we all have a unique upbringing in itself. We all have unique mothers, we're each unique, we all have unique family dynamics. Obviously primary caregivers come into play, whether that's a father or another caregiver. So there's so many factors that can impact the level of the wound. So for example, just an example. So I specialize in mother wounds, but let's say growing up, you are shut down by both your mom and your dad. So that wound's going to be bigger, right? And that could turn into like a trauma, a little trauma or a big trauma. Um, if you were in foster care, right, and you have a whole bunch of different primary caregivers, you're certainly going to have, um, well, you will quite likely have mother wounds because, first of all, you lost your mother potentially if you're in foster care, right? And then, however you're raised and parented by your primary caregivers during your upbringing is going to determine what wounding you acquire and also the degree of it.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm just gonna like, I can picture some listeners right now and they're like, oh, well, I didn't have any real big stuff. Like, stay with us, because this shows up for you in ways that you don't know in your life now. Even if you can't pinpoint an exact moment or sequence of events or pattern that you can identify now, there's people like Heidi who are here to like help us understand what it could be and where it could come from. So stick with us, even if you're not feeling super clear if this is applicable to you or not, right? Because, um, okay, this might help the listeners. Can you give us some ideas of how this can show up and impact our lives now as we are mothers and adults?
Yeah, in so many ways. So, just to give you some examples, so I shared the example of being emotionally suppressed. So what happens with that typically, and I was growing up, I was emotionally suppressed. My mother was emotionally suppressed. So she basically parented me with her wound, and it just passes down until somebody breaks the cycle. So growing up, I and my siblings were raised with emotional neglect. We were emotionally suppressed. My mother, who I adore, had no idea how to show up for us when we were dysregulated, crying, sad. She just didn't know what to do. And so she shut me down. We were shut down. And so I learned in these experiences growing up that sharing my feelings and emotions was unaccepted, was not safe, and not allowed. And so growing up into adulthood, in my adult relationships, I don't know how to share myself emotionally. I don't know how to share feelings. I don't feel safe sharing my feelings and emotions with others because I never did it growing up. It's foreign to me, right? And so first of all, like for me, I I didn't even know how to identify my feelings. I noticed like when I was in my adult life, my friends, everybody could easily express, I'm sad, I'm angry, and I'm just like, I don't know. I don't know what I feel because I was never able to identify and confirm my feelings growing up. Nobody validated them. Nobody reflected back to me, Heidi, I'm so sorry that you're angry. Heidi, I'm so sorry you're sad. You're frustrated. I'm sure you're so hurt, right? So as an adult, I started spending time with myself trying to understand why don't I know how I feel all the time, right? And so then you have adult relationships, friendships, a partnership, a marriage, and you don't know how to express yourself in marriage and partnerships, and that creates distance. It actually creates distance with everybody. So I noticed for myself, and this is true, that when you are unable to be vulnerable and emotionally and share and give of yourself to others in that way, it creates distance between you and others because others can't quite get to know you. They don't know like what makes Heidi tick, what makes her sad, what makes her excited, because she never shares her feelings with us, right? And then in marriage, of course, that's going to create a barrier with your spouse or partner where, in our partnerships, of course, we get upset and angry and hurt and cry, right? And it's really important to be able to express and say, hey, you really hurt my feelings because of X, Y, and Z. And I was not able to do that. I had no idea how to show up in my, well, let's just say marriage, but also my friendships and say, you hurt my feelings because of X, Y, and Z. I didn't know how to identify it. I didn't know how to express it. And I also did not learn how to confront people. And so I just had like triple whammies
Yeah.
growing up. And so that's just an example of how it shows up in our life. Another one could be growing up, not feeling loved, disapproved of. Your mom is jealous of you. Your mom competes with you, right? So you go out into the world and you don't feel safe among women. You feel competitive with women. You feel untrusting of women. You may feel less worthy in front of certain women, maybe women that resemble your mother, right? Because your mother made you feel less than and she competed with you, right? And so with other women that may just other women in general, but then other women that may have any similarities to your mother, you'll feel an instant lack of safety, competitiveness, and such. And also you feel less than, you feel less than, not good enough. And you take that into your relationships, right? Like that doesn't go away. So when you feel less than and not good enough, you feel it throughout your life. It's not like today I feel less than, but tomorrow I'm back to normal, right? And so you carry that into your female relationships, into your romantic relationships. And then, to take another step further, for me, like as a parent, if I didn't heal my emotional neglect, I would be raising my son that same way because I didn't learn it from my parents, right? And so when I was growing up as an adult and I was experiencing all these adult relationships, I would notice that I would really struggle with why can't I share like my feeling? Like I love people, I love connecting. Like why can't I connect with my feelings and share my emotions? And so I really worked on it and I healed it. But if I didn't, I would be raising my son that same way where I wouldn't know how to show up for him when he's sad or angry or anything because I didn't learn how to. But I healed it. And so thankfully I can show up for him that way. So as far as all the different ways of impacting, it impacts all your relationships in different ways. And also if you're a parent or you're going to be a future parent, it could impact your parenting and passing your wounds on to your children.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many pieces as you were talking. I can just imagine the listeners like ping, ping, ping. Oh, now I get it. This is a piece that I see in my life. And could this link back? And also interesting, I'm wondering if you see like generation to generation, like culturally, are there things that are more common? Because like I know a lot of people in my so I'm a millennial, like an older millennial. But my parents probably and parents of many of my friends, they were raising us the same way, right? Like collectively we were experiencing um this this lack of emotional support, right? It wasn't something that was there was no like lovey-dovey, ooey gooey parenting, like conscious parenting, gentle parenting like we're doing now. It was a whole other way of parenting. And so I wonder how much of this can be also sort of attributed to or attached to like culture. Is that
Mhm.
something that
Yeah,
plays as well?
absolutely. Yes. So culture definitely plays a role in upbringing, and that plays a role in, potentially inheriting wounds.
Yeah.
Certain cultures are, and I can't speak to all the different cultures, but I know from my culture, very hardworking, just get it done. Don't think about how you feel. Don't express your feelings. Don't complain. Just do it, right? And so, growing up in that environment, which I actually did grow up in, I grew up to work really, really hard, never think about myself, give everything to everybody else. That was well, I would say that was part of my culture, and also my parents were raised that same way, where you just work hard and you don't think about yourselves, your feelings, all those other things. Um, I would also say that generationally, like you said, you're a millennial, and that's a factor too, because like when I think about all those folks that I grew up with, I'm in my 50s now. Many of us grew up emotionally suppressed because our parents had no clue, right? They were just trying to survive. There were divorced parents, there were single parents, and you're just trying to survive. You're always doing your best as a parent. Like you're never intentionally trying to create wounds for your children, and parents don't realize that they're creating wounds. Like this is all subconscious. So my mom does not know that I have, or my dad, that I have, 20 wounds from my upbringing. They have no idea, right? And but you learn it when you become an adult and you're in life and you're experiencing life, you're experiencing hardships, you're experiencing recurring struggles, recurring triggers in your relationships in your life. Those are signals and signs of mother, father upbringing wounds.
Right.
Yeah.
And so you had mentioned that you in your own personal life have broken the cycle so that you're not passing these same wounds on to your son. I mean, we all know we'll pass different wounds on and they'll end up in therapy someday because it's all subconscious and we're not trying to do that. But I want to dig into, can you give the audience a few examples or like just intro ideas on what the work looks like to do the healing? Like how can we move past these things?
Yeah. So I will say that so I started my personal development journey at 19, and I knew that there were issues with, my parents had a really unhealthy marriage. They were forced to get married, had a lot of conflict. I saw a lot of unhealthy relationship modeling. I also had struggled in my relationship with my mom when I was becoming an adult. So I started therapy at 19 and just continued throughout my life. And through that, I was just uncovering wound after wound after wound. And I was like, I got a lot of work to do. But when it comes to identifying your wounds and healing them, the first step is to get curious about yourself. Where do you struggle where do you struggle internally? And where do you struggle in your life? What comes up for you? Do you have negative self-talk? Do you self-sabotage? Do you judge yourself? Do you feel like you have low self-worth? Do you feel like others are better than you? Others are more important to you than you? Do you feel like you're not valuable or you're undeserving, right? So those are all, and also, do you have people pleasing tendencies? That's also one, right? And that's a big one because when we have people pleasing tendencies, we neglect ourselves. We give everything to everyone else. We have no boundaries. We do everything everybody says, right? That's just like a domino effect of not a good path. And so really identifying like where in my life do I struggle? Do I have healthy communication in my relationships? Do I have healthy conflict, or do I always have terrible, fights with my partner or my spouse, and we just never come to a resolution, right? It's just going to happen again and again and again. And those are examples of wounding. And the other piece, as it relates to mother wounds, is looking at your relationship with your mother and how has that relationship been in your life? Like growing up, was she always there for you? Did she love you unconditionally? Did she always have your back? Did she always show up for you? Obviously, parents aren't perfect. We're not always going to be there, but for the most part, was she someone you could always count on emotionally, physically? Was she present? Did she, you know, did you always feel approved and validated by her and honored, seen, and heard on all those things? And if you say no to a lot of those questions, then you probably have wounding.
Right.
And if you had a difficult or have a difficult relationship with your mother, then you probably have mother wounds because there's some part of your relationship that was not or is not working. And that means that there's probably a wound or wounds there.
I'm curious to know, as we're doing the healing work, is it important at all if our mother is still living to be able to deal with these wounds? Or if, like, what if we have a strained or estranged relationship? What if it's not safe to do the work alongside? You know what I mean? Like, can we do the work on our own? Do we bring our moms in? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, it's such a good question. No, your mom does not have to be present. And I'll say that for all the work that I did, which I've done decades of work, and not just mother wounds, I had father wounds, I had other things too. My mom to this day has no idea that I ever did any personal development work. I did it all by myself, but what I was able to do was when we do the work, we change and we start so two things. When we do the work, we change, we transform, we start showing up differently in our relationships. For me, I started showing up with boundaries. I never had boundaries before. I wasn't raised with boundaries, right? So I started showing up in my relationship with my mom with some initial boundaries. And so she never knew I was doing the work, but I started showing up differently. So, no, your mother does not have to be present. Your mother does not even have to be alive for you to do healing work. Um, the other piece I was going to say is, but if your mother does not have to be present, your mother does not have to be alive. You can absolutely do healing and growth work on your own. But if you feel your mother would be open and really curious about it and want to do work together with you and you think it would be positive, you could consider including her in the process, which could be really beautiful because then you're both healing and growing, and she's learning about these wounds that she imparted on you subconsciously. And so that's gonna heal you quicker versus doing it all on your own, right? And that's a choice, that's a decision you can make at any point in your process. Like with clients that I work with, I'll work with them independently, but they might bring their mom in session 4, and we'll have the mom just in session 4, in session 8, in session 12. when my client wants the mom there and the mom wants to come. So the mom doesn't necessarily have to be in every single session. Also, the daughter can still do the session and report and share back to the mother. So there's a lot of different ways to include the mother if you want to, and you would feel it would be beneficial, but you do not have to include her at all. And you can still be completely successful in doing the work and healing, which is a really beautiful thing, especially for women who have estranged mothers where they just zero contact or their mother passed away. Like there still is the opportunity to heal from whatever the wounding is, abandonment, even, I mean, even for women who have had their mother pass at a young age, they definitely have wounds and you could heal that. And I'm not saying the work is quick and easy, but it's small steps, it's patient, small, loving, kind steps, and you can heal from it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's such an incredible offering that you have in this really specific space for women. And, do you ever work with men too, or is it mostly
Mhm.
women? Yeah.
I do. Yeah. I do have some male clients. And I also specialize in relationships. So I also kind of coach folks on marriage and separation and all the things. But yes, I do work with men as well. And I enjoy that a lot. I think it's really fun to work with men because I can also coach them about how to show up in their relationships with their women
Right.
as well, and help them heal wounds. Because, I'm a mother wound coach, but we also have father wounds. Women have father wounds, men have mother wounds, right? So, yeah.
Right. And if someone's wondering, maybe, do I have a mother wound? I don't know. When we were talking before we hit record, you had shared with me that you're generously offering your time to chat with anyone who's curious and do a little complimentary assessment call. Can you tell us a little bit how the listeners can access that and what that could look like for them?
Yeah, the way they can access it is just to reach out to me. You can reach out to me through my website, which is HeidiCarlsonCoaching.com. You can also DM me on LinkedIn, Instagram, or Facebook. I'm most present on LinkedIn right now, but you can DM me through either of those platforms. But I think that I'm so passionate about helping women. My passion is helping women clear all obstacles in their way to live an empowered life in all areas, in their relationships, in their career, and parenting, and really just have that inner peace and knowing that I've got me, I'm good. I don't have, these big obstacles in my way. And so I would love to offer that to your community if anyone is curious, like I'm just not sure if I have mother wounds. I don't really know. And I don't, when I think about, my relationship with my mom, I'm not really sure how I feel. So I'm happy to hop on a call with them to help them get a little clearer, to realize like, wow, I have a lot of wounds, or I actually only have a couple and I don't really care. Like they don't bother me, they don't bother my life, they don't show up much. And so they can kind of decide from our call if further work and research and getting curious is necessary. And if so, what that might look like. There's a lot of resources out there, as well as, coaches, or, yes, I have a couple wounds, but they don't really bother me today. I don't see them bothering me in the future either. If they do, I'll address them at that later time. And also, if you're becoming a parent or a parent, I really like to drive the message, and not to worry moms at all, not to worry women, but I really drive the message that if you're a parent or parenting and you have these wounds, really take a look at yourself and just see, am I passing them on to my children? I don't, am I passing down unhealthy communication? Am I honoring their boundaries? Am I showing up for them emotionally? Am I loving them unconditionally? Am I, all these things? Because the last thing we want to do and try not to do is pass our wounds down to our children, because it will continue to perpetuate, and then they'll just have the same struggles that we had um, in their adult lives, right? So I would love to help women just kind of get clear if they have any wounding, and if it's like, problematic and needs attention, or it just really isn't that big of a deal right now.
Right. Yeah. Because knowledge is power, right? When we know, we get to decide what to do with that. But having that knowledge
Mm.
can really guide us and be helpful, even if someone's not ready to take the step to do the work,
Yeah.
or whatever. So, Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for
I mean,
that.
I had a very long list of wounds, and my parents were immigrants. They were forced to get married young. They didn't have life and relationship skills enough yet for marriage and family. They had 5 kids. They had a really tough marriage. So, and then they brought their wounds and traumas into parenting, right? So it was just inevitable that me and my siblings were going to have a lot of wounds. But I'm so grateful because to my knowledge, I'm not passing any of them down to my son. I've healed them all. And so I could have taught him like really intense people pleasing because my whole family, like hardcore people pleasing. We would give everything to everybody. And that just really sets you up for a very difficult life. And so I'm just so grateful that I, as a parent, was able to heal, especially some of my big wounds. So my son is growing up with boundaries. He's growing up taking care of himself first, self-prioritizing himself over others, being kind and compassionate, but not jeopardizing himself for others. Hopefully learning healthy communication, healthy conflict, right? Like I'm doing my best, but parenting is tough.
Yes, it
So
is.
we can only do our best and like pray that we're doing enough and then set them free.
Yeah, I'm just so
Yeah.
grateful that there are people like you doing this work, helping us to do this work, facilitating the healing. It's a really powerful thing, and so I would just encourage anyone listening, if you're curious, reach out to Heidi. Let her know that you heard about her here on the podcast, and have that assessment call and just see where it might lead. Right. So, yeah, that's, I think, such a beautiful place to leave the listeners today. Is there, before we officially wrap up, I sometimes just like to check, is there anything that feels important to say that we haven't touched on, or any sort of thought that you might want to leave the listeners with today, Heidi?
I think I would just like to say, are you really um Are you really self-prioritizing? Are you putting yourselves first, especially if you're a parent? Like I know for me, when my son was young, I was absolutely not self-prioritizing. I didn't know what I was doing. I was overworked. I didn't, and I was, when he was young, really little, I was still people pleasing. I didn't quite heal that yet. So I was a mess, and I was not on the list. I was a disaster. I was exhausted, and so I'm just I would love women to really take a look at themselves and make sure that they're really prioritizing themselves because number one, they deserve it. Number two, they have a big job and you have to fill your cup. You have to feel nurtured and feel like you're, filling your cup on a regular basis and giving, time for yourself and loving on you and not giving of everything to everyone else. And with that, just really looking within yourself if anything is in your way of that. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Such an important reminder for all of us. Keep it top
Yeah.
of mind. We need to put ourselves back on the list. Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you, Heidi.
You're
Really
welcome.
appreciate you being here today. And to all of the listeners, until next week, keep on growing like a mother.